Hi everyone, it's me. Welcome to today's video. We're starting to really wrap up the year. So today we're actually going to talk about my 24 top reads for 2024. It's not quite the end of the year on the day I'm filming this video. It is December 14th, so I will likely read at least 5 more books by the end of the year, maybe 6 books by the end of the year. But this is the list of my favorite reads so far. I have 2 of these piles with me right here. I've got this one and there's actually one behind it. First things first, I don't actually have a tea today, so we don't have a tea of the day, but we're sticking with good old trusty water. I feel like I always need to super hydrate before we get into these yap sessions because I talk a lot. So we're gonna talk about these not particularly in exact order from 24th to 1st, but I have broken down this list into genres just so everything's a little bit more organized as we go through them. But this is basically my 24 top books in no particular order. We're gonna start with my favorite fantasy reads because I feel like fantasy has taken up the majority of this list of 24. I can't help it. I just love reading fantasy. And so yeah, we're gonna do fantasy. We're also combining sci-fi into this category, so it's fantasy sci-fi. And the first one we have on this list is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. Oh my gosh, when I tell you, this is an amazing fantasy. We follow a family in this small, very Japanese-inspired village. Basically, their main goal, their main value is to train to protect their village. And so our main characters are a son and a mother, and we follow them through this war as the son trains to be the warrior that he was destined to be, and the mother struggles with the idea of being a traditional mother because she's had more of an exciting upbringing. I don't really want to say too much about this because I want you to just go into it with clean slate, but just know that you should read this book. My impression of it is Poppy War meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's one that will hurt you. Be prepared for that emotional impact. It is not a light read, we'll put it that way, but it's so good. It's so good. While I was reading this book, I just felt so connected to these main characters immediately within the first 30 pages of the book. Definitely deserves to be on this list of top books of the year. Next, we have The Will of the Many by James Islington, or I've heard people say Islington, so I don't know if it's Islington or Islington. Let me know if you know, but I've heard both ways and I've just been saying Islington because we have a street name in Toronto called Islington and that's how we say it. This book just broke my brain this year, to be quite honest. It is this amazing story. We have a magical academy, which put me in any magical academy and I will love it. We have this really cool hierarchy and government system in here, and we have this kind of mostly unknown magic system. I think from this first book, we got a little bit of explanation on it, but I think we're gonna expand on that in the next books. We're gonna expand on many things in the next books. I feel like this book also is just leaving me speechless. When I finished reading it, I texted one of my friends immediately and just started theorizing, going wild on the theories, just freaking out. It is one of those books that you will think about months after you read it. The build up to the second book is one of those super exciting, kind of cliffhangery endings. What am I saying? Kind of cliffhangery? Really cliffhangery? So good. A lot of people compare James Islington to Brandon Sanderson, and I have mentioned to you guys before that I personally prefer The Will of the Many over the Brandon Sanderson books I have read so far. So there's that. Take that how you want to take that. Oh my gosh. This is A Song to Drown Rivers by Liang, and this book broke me in a very different way than The Will of the Many broke me. This one was more of an emotional break over a mind-boggling break. I think on Goodreads it is a historical fantasy romance. I'm going to be honest with you. I know I've put this in my fantasy stack because it's categorized under fantasy, but it is more historical romance, I would say, with the tiniest touch of fantasy. This one follows the Chinese legend of Zixi and Fan Li. Zixi is the most beautiful woman ever in China, and she is recruited by Fan Li, who's a general, to sort of infiltrate their enemy's king, try and seduce him to get insider information on their enemy and to try and make a scheme to take him down from within. There's romance, there's forbidden love, there's secrecy, spies. So good. And it's not so fantasy. It's not one of those those books that has like the super complex world and magic system. You don't go into this book expecting that, but it's more of the historical element, like it's a real Chinese legend, and you get, yeah, the romance, the forbidden romance. It's just so good, and the scheming and the behind the scenes. Yeah, the ending of this book just broke me. This is one of the, I don't know, probably 10 books this year that made me like genuinely sob. A Song to Drown Rivers. This one was super fun. So When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. This is one of those romanticities that just like blew up this year. It became so viral, it was so popular, and I loved it. This was actually one of my like in-person book club picks of the month, and I know in my book club it got kind of mixed reviews, but I personally really loved this book. This one is definitely more of a high fantasy compared to A Song to Drown Rivers, but we still have that romantic element as well. In this book, we have a world that's made up of different gods, and all the gods are elemental. So we have like a god for air, we have a god for water, for fire, for earth, etc. And then our magic on this world is we have fae. Honestly, I'm gonna be honest, they're barely fae. They're just like kind of magical people. They're magical beings. And the way that the magic like exists in this world is that the gods that made this world, they all have their own songs and they're always singing. And then the people or the fae on this world either hear the songs or they don't. And if they hear the songs, they can harness those to also harness the god's power of that particular song. We have fae that can't hear anything. We have fae that can hear one song so they can harness one element, like water, for example. We have fae that can hear 2 songs, some that can hear 3 songs, and the more songs you hear, the more powerful you are, essentially. The main character in this book was very annoying to me, but I feel like the world and the story and everything else outside of her made up for it. We also have this element of like old journal entries and a mystery with that, which I absolutely love. Like, I eat that stuff up. We also have dragons. How did I miss that? We have dragons and dragon moons, probably like my favorite aspect of this book in this world. I feel like some people are a little bit intimidated by the heft, the thickness of this book, but there's not that many words on each page, and it seems like a very thick book. There's like 600, 700 pages maybe, but it goes by super quick. It reads more like a 400-page book, I will be honest with you, and I think someone actually recently looked into the specific word count of this book, and it's like shorter than the first ACOTAR book, like around the same length or something like that. I might be completely wrong in saying that, but I'm pretty sure I just saw someone say that online. So When the Moon Hatched. Okay, we have another book that made me absolutely break down, and I had this breakdown on camera as I was reading this book like in January. So The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. This is the 3rd book in the Poppy War trilogy, and oh my gosh, I mean, this entire trilogy just broke me all the way throughout the journey, but the end of this book, like the way everything concluded, I can't even say anything. I don't want to spoil anything, but read this trilogy. I know I said the Sword of Kaigan was like this trilogy essentially meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. There are similar events that occur in both of the books because they are both actually based on the same real world war. There are some dark things, and I feel like they were written more in gruesome detail in the Poppy War trilogy versus the Sword of Kaigan, but there are similar themes. It's not happy. You don't read these books to be happy, but I will say that this entire trilogy was a masterpiece from start to finish. It was so good. R.F. Kuang is like my top 3, my like holy trinity of favorite authors, and I think this is the book that like made me sob the hardest this year. Like, if we're ranking books in terms of like what made me cry the most, it's probably this one, because I just love when books make me cry. I feel like some people don't really love that, but like if a book can make me feel things, I just love it. Okay, continuing on with the fantasies, we have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is the 1st book in a duology. I did read both of them this year, but I liked Ninth House more than Hellbent, the 2nd book. And I say duology, but I'm convinced a 3rd book is coming out because Hellbent did not conclude. It did not conclude. It did not tie all the loose ends. So I'm 100% convinced that there's another book coming. But as of right now, this is a duology because I don't know, they sell these as a box set, and when they start doing that, it just seems like duology material, but no, there's gonna be more. This one's like a dark academia fantasy. We're set at Yale University. We have all the secret societies like Skull and Bones and all of that. And our main character gets twisted into all of this. She starts working for a group that basically like tries to keep all the societies in line. But there's a lot of dark things. There's a lot of like rituals and like seance type things going on in here. It's very ghosty, it's very demony, and it's just so much fun. It is one of those books that is a bit tougher to get into. I think have heard a lot of criticism about that in this book, but once you get over like all the information of the secret societies, it's so good. I love the story under all of that, and this book made me want to visit Yale so bad and like go around and see like the houses of all these secret societies. Obviously, I probably wouldn't be able to go inside of them because they're secret, but I want to see them like from the outside. And I always find it so interesting when fantasies are set in the real world and they're so based in reality. Like I remember when I was reading this book, I kept getting a little bit confused, like blurred lines between what was reality and what was like just fantasy and made up in this book, because I feel like it used a lot of real facts about the societies. So then it was, yeah, it felt like a really immersive kind of like real world experience, and I thought that was really cool. So ninth house. Okay, we're getting into V.E. Schwab, another one of my like holy trinity top 3 authors. So we're talking about Vicious first, and this one is a little bit more of a sci-fi over a fantasy. This one follows 2 like besties. It's also set in a school, and these besties are experimenting, like sort of doing this science experiment for a class they have together, but they're kind of like experimenting with themselves and like this whole theory of like giving themselves like superpowers, basically turning them into superheroes. An experiment goes awfully wrong and they end up in this like, yeah, kind of like anti-superhero journey, because these 2 guys are like, they're the most morally gray characters I've ever read. This series is called The Villains, or just Villains, and I always say this, V.E. Schwab writes the best villains. So when she makes the villains her main characters, it's just so good. It's one of those that's also currently a duology, but I'm pretty sure she's writing the 3rd book as we speak. I feel like this suits her so well. But again, similar with Ninth House, in this series I really loved the 1st book more than the 2nd, but yeah, literally so good. One of my top reads of the year, and I can't wait for the next one to come out. I may have to wait like 2 years for it, but I'm so excited nonetheless. Continuing on with our V.E. Schwab journey, I also read The Fragile Threads of Power by her this year. This is like a spin-off series from her Darker Shade of Magic trilogy, so you definitely have to read that one before going into this, but it's basically like a direct continuation of that series. We follow the same cast of characters plus a few more, but this is like one of the coolest settings that I have ever read. It's also another one of those that's like kind of based in reality but with a fantastical element. So in this world we have 4 parallel universes. We're set in London, so we have 4 Londons and they all differ in their magic level. We first have Grey London, which is like pretty much real world London. There's not really any magic at all. We have Red London, which is where our main characters reside. This one just seems to be like the most well-balanced London. We have magic, but it's contained properly and people, I don't know how to use the magic in the right way where it doesn't fall out of balance. We have White London, which is naturally more magical than Red London, but they've sort of overused their magic to the point where it's sort of in this weakened state. Like it's been overused, the balance has been thrown off, and so the magic has become weaker because of that overuse. And then we have Black London, which is still honestly a bit of a mystery. It's the most powerful London, but years ago it sort of imploded on itself because of the extreme imbalance in magic level. We have this multi-POV following this very interesting cast of characters, which I love. Like I love the characters in this world, and yeah, this is the spin-off. It's so good. I want more in this world. I'm like craving more in this world. I feel like V.E. Schwab, I'm waiting for all of her releases because I'm excited about this series. I'm excited about Vicious. She has a 2025 release that's, you know, coming out next year, which I actually read this year. So that one is also actually on this list of my top 24 books of 2024 because I did in fact read it this year, and that is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. I received the e-arc for this book and I'm just like still so honored, so blessed that I was able to get an early copy of this book. This book I would describe as a mix between her Addie LaRue book and Vicious, which I just talked about, because we have this like long spanning journey that takes over centuries following these female characters. I know Addie LaRue followed 1 character, but this one follows 3. So we have that, but then we mix that with like these evil, like villain characters like we have in Vicious. And it's just like this perfect blend between the two. V. Schwab herself said she has like literally not put so much of herself into this book since she wrote Addie LaRue, and she thinks like she bared her entire soul in Bury Our Bones, and you can definitely feel that. Like reading this book, you just like feel so close to like V. Schwab's heart, and you can tell how much of like her soul and her just like everything that she put into it. It's so good. I still have the book pre-ordered for next year because I read it, but I want it in physical. Bury Our Bones, so good. Definitely read it next year when it comes out. We have Six Crimson Cranes. So this one is a duology, and I did finish the duology this year. There's also a prequel to this book, which I haven't read yet, but it's on my TBR cart behind me. And this is another one actually where I preferred the first book in the duology over the second. What I really loved about this book, like my favorite part of this book, is how we followed a softer female main character. I feel like recently I've just been getting a lot of fantasy books where our female main characters are these really strong warrior fighter type characters. And while I love that, obviously, I think it's so refreshing to read a fantasy where the female main character is just like a bit softer. Like, yes, still strong, but in different ways. Like, she doesn't have to be a fighter, she doesn't have to be a warrior, she doesn't have to be a thief. In Six Crimson Cranes, our main character Shiori still sort of serves that role of like, she's doing certain things to protect her family. In this case, it was her 6 brothers, but she does it in like a softer way. Like, she doesn't fight, she doesn't train, she doesn't do that stuff, but it's more of interacting with people, going to find things, like going on a quest. She doesn't train in combat, let's put it that way. So I love that about this book. It also felt very fairy tale vibes, which I loved, and I just have been loving like any fantasy book with Asian influence this year. Definitely one of my top reads. We're actually going to talk about Five Broken Blades next by my Corland, because this is another one that had very strong Asian cultural roots tied in. This one was based in Korea. It's not Korea, it's, I forget what the name of this world was. Let's see if we can find it. Yusan, but it's like a Korean-based fantasy world. And in this one, we follow this like very misfit ragtag group of like liars. They're assassins or thieves. They're all like these criminals that lie to each other, but are brought together to pull off this. It's not like a heist, but it is like a task. Like, they have to work together to assassinate the king. That's what they're hired to do. They have so many issues trusting each other because they're all used to working solo. They're not used to trusting anyone around them. So they're constantly trying to find this balance of like working together, but then also everyone's keeping a little secret for themselves. Like, everyone is only looking after themselves, and because of that, everything sort of like blows up in their faces. We get a lot of betrayal in this book, and it's a lot of fun. This is the first book in a trilogy. The second book is coming out next year, and I will just say this was a whole lot of fun. It was pure fun, and I'm so excited for the second book. So that's Five Broken Blades. We're at the bottom of our first pile. So we have The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley. This is actually a book I read like literally last week, so it was one of the last books that I squeezed into this list. But this one is a sci-fi. There is a romantic element in it, but I would say it's more of just like a sci-fi story. We have our main character who gets a new job working for the Ministry, which is like super top secret, and they are testing time travel. They've discovered this time travel machine, and they're starting to bring back people from the past to see if they can assimilate to the current day world, and to see if they could successfully like fit into society now with the right training, with the right transition period. So our main character is hired as someone who will oversee this expat, they call them. She moves in with this guy from the 1800s and just experiences trying to teach him about the current day world. Like, he's never seen a toilet before. He doesn't know the cultural significance of things these days, or like what's politically correct or what's not. So she has to show him and lead him through all of that. And that's all I'm gonna say. There's a little bit of romance. It's a really, really interesting book. It dives deep into a lot of different themes, and it sort of like makes you a little bit uncomfortable, but I think that's good sometimes, to read a book that makes you a little uncomfy. But I loved it. I thought this was a great story, and this was a debut novel by Kaliane Bradley, so I'm really excited to see what she writes next. All right, let's bring this second pile forward. We are still in fantasy. Can you believe it? Like, how many fantasies did I read and love this year? Love that for me. But on the top here, we have Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This one was another book that was just pure fun. I always describe this book as a spicy gothic caraval, and as you guys know, I'm not really like a spice reader, so this book, I will admit, was a bit too spicy for myself personally, but I think the story behind it was so much fun that I still had to put this book on one of my top reads of the year because I enjoyed it so much. So we follow two sisters. At the beginning of this book, their mother dies, and so these two girls start struggling with their finances because they realize that their mom like left them in financial ruin, essentially. The younger sister secretly enters Phantasma, which is very much like Caraval. It's like a traveling competition game that's hosted by like a devil or a demon, and the winner will get whatever they wish for, essentially. So her younger sister enters because she's like, I'm gonna help us, I'm gonna win Phantasma, and I'm gonna bring home the money, and like we don't have to suffer anymore. But Phantasma is a very dangerous game, so our main character Ophelia goes into Phantasma to find her sister, save her, maybe pull her out of the game. So very similar story structure to Caraval in that way, but once we get into the games, it's like way more high stakes. There are 9 trials, all based on the 9 rings of hell, and it's just so much fun. It's super fast paced. It is a romantasy, so we have a romance element, and we do have a sequel coming out next year as well, so Phantasma. I think this is actually the last fantasy or sci-fi of this list, which is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. So this is the first book in a 7-book series. I think there are 4 out currently, with the 5th one coming out soon. We are set in London, but it looks very different because it's now called Scion, and we're in this like London world where clairvoyants are hunted, and clairvoyants can be anything from like oracles to seers to psychics, clairvoyant stuff. Our main character Paige is obviously, of course, a clairvoyant, so she's living her life underground. There is this like underground clairvoyant society. It's very kind of like crime syndicate, and she is like very high ranked in this underground society. When one day she gets caught, she gets thrown into jail, a whole new world opens up to her, and then she has to figure out either how to escape or if she wants to learn more about what she is seeing before her right now, because there's this big twist and it's kind of unbelievable what's happening, and that's her story. This book was so much fun. It was so good. It was honestly better than I expected because this book doesn't actually have very high ratings on Goodreads. So I was so shocked to see that rating and then see like how much I loved it, but there is an explanation for that. Samantha Shannon wrote this book over 10 years ago, and recently in the past few years, she rewrote the first 4 books in the series and re-released them because she felt so attached to the series and loved the story, but just like thought her writing back then didn't do the story justice. So she literally rewrote 4 books, re-released them, and I think the rewrites, I haven't read the original books, obviously, but I have heard from people who have read both that the rewrites are way better, and that's why the series is getting more attention, like getting more popular now, is because the rewrites are so good. And I find that just so fascinating. Like, that is dedication, rewriting 4 entire books, but so worth it. I think that was a great call on Samantha Shannon's part because this book was so good, and I'm so excited to continue on in the series. Yeah, it sounds like kind of intimidating because there are 7 books in the series, but it's worth it so far. I've only read the first one, but I hope the rest of the series lives up. The Bone Season. Okay, we're finally out of fantasy. We are in the romance portion of my top reads for the year. The first one I'm going to talk about is This Time It's Real. Another Anne Liang made this list. This is a YA romance actually, which is so fascinating that I loved it because I feel like YA generally doesn't hit as hard for me, but I loved this one. It was just so sweet. It was simple. It wasn't trying to be more than it was, but it was just done so well. I also just love Anne Liang's writing in general, so I feel like Anne Liang, like, she's one of those authors that I feel like could write a grocery list and it would be interesting. Like, you know that vibe. This one is set in China. It follows a girl, what's her name? Eliza, who writes an essay that goes viral, but then it catches her in all sorts of lies because the essay she wrote was based on just fiction and not fact, and now everyone is like invested in her life and what she wrote about the essay because she wrote this like beautiful self-insert relationship in it, so everyone's now like, hey, who's your boyfriend? Who's this guy in the essay? And so she's like, oh no, I have to find a boyfriend. So in steps Kaz, who is like this famous actor in China who also happens to go to her school. We get set up in this fake dating situation. I think I mentioned this in one video before, but I swear 2024 is the year that convinced me on the fake dating trope, because prior to this year, all the fake dating books that I read, I was like, I don't like this trope. I'm not believing it. I don't care for it. But I think all three of the romance books that made this top 24 list this year have the fake dating trope. So I'm like, you know what? I guess maybe like if it's done to like my preference, when it's done well, I do like the fake dating trope. So that's This Time It's Real. It was a super quick little read, but it was so cute. It was endearing, and it did tug very strong at my heartstrings at the end. So there we have it. And it can't be a top 24 list without an M hen. So Funny Story by Emily Henry. It lived up to the hype. I loved it. I love Emily Henry so much. She can do no wrong in my eyes. It is another fake dating trope, as I mentioned. And I think honestly the internet knows enough about this book and the story that I don't have to summarize it. This book had me laughing, it had me giggling, it had me crying. It just did everything to me. So Funny Story. And I'm so excited for Emily Henry's release next year as well. Great Big Beautiful Life. So excited. There is another book that I read on my Kindle that I love this year in the romance category, and that was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I just think her recent romances have been hitting so hard. And funny enough, this is another like sort of a fake dating situation, but it's fake dating for a different reason. Like it's done with a twist, and it's not for like the usual reasons that you see in a fake dating. Like usually in romance books, when you get the fake dating trope, the reason for it is because like they want to convince like an ex that they've moved on and they're doing better, or they just need to like present as a couple for, I don't know, familial reasons or for career reasons, just like stuff like that. In Just for the Summer, we have fake dating because the two characters are trying to get rid of a curse. And it's not like a magical fantasy, it's not like magical realism, but we have these two main characters that are convinced that everyone they date finds their true love after they break up with them. So they come to this arrangement. They're like, okay, well, if we date each other, then when we break up, our next boyfriends and girlfriends or whatever partners will be our true matches, and then we will break each other's curses. So that's the situation in this one. It's so highly creative. It's so funny. As I mentioned, her recent books have just been hitting so hard. I feel like she has improved so much as an author, because I've currently also read her older releases this year, and those ones just like really don't do it as much for me. But Just for the Summer and all the books in this little series are so good. I love them. They make me cry, they make me laugh. Similar to Emily Henry, very good at intertwining more literary fiction aspects of life stories. So we get like family stuff, we get friendship stuff, we get like general life stuff. It's not like all just about the romance, and I love that about romance books. When romance books are not fully romance books, sometimes those are just like my favorite. We're going into the category of books that sort of made me cry or like made me really emotional. So the first one is a literary fiction, The Storied Life of AJ Fikry. This is such a cute little book. Like look how small and approachable and friendly. But this book, while it doesn't have so many pages, packs a punch. My goodness. We follow this like grumpy bookstore owner, and he lives on this like small island, and is just well known for being really grumpy, especially after his wife passed away. So he's in this like grieving period where he's drinking a lot, he's just like cranky at everyone, when one day a baby gets dropped on his doorstep, and he basically has no other option than to like take this baby in and make sure it's okay. And this event changes the course of his life. This book was just so unbelievably cozy. It's actually also been made into a movie, which I haven't watched, but the cover of this book is reminding me that it is indeed a movie and I should watch it. But definitely pick up this book. It's small, you'll read it quickly, but it packs such a big punch and it's so good. We have As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow, which is sort of a mix between literary fiction and historical fiction. We are set in Syria and we follow a nurse who is torn between staying in the country to protect her people. Like she's a nurse, she's like one of the only people left who can take care of the injured and the sick, but she's torn because she also has this best friend, this sister-in-law who is pregnant. They're the only ones remaining in their family, and so she feels this call to also leave the country with her sister-in-law and to like help protect her so her baby can be born in, you know, a safer place, not a place of war. Yeah? Okay. Whoa! I just got a really cool package. I think I know what this is. But I can't open it right now because I'm trying to talk about the books that I've already read. I think I know what that is. Maybe I'll unbox it in another video for you guys.
Oh, you got another package?
Bye boys, love you. I think that's the new Fonda Lee release. Because I'm pretty sure her release for next year looks like that. Like the cover of it and the outside of the box matches it. Hold on. No, I can't get distracted. We have to keep talking about these books. What was I saying about this book? I don't remember. We go along with the main character as she does things that are questionably moral, but it's like one of those things of like, how far will you go in the time of war to protect the people that you love? This is another book that made me sob this year, so read it. It's so good. The writing is also really, really lovely in this book. It's very poetic. It's just beautiful. As Long as Lemon Trees Grow by Zoulfa, Katouh. We're into our Kristin Hannah section. So Kristin Hannah has 3 books on this list. She obviously made an impact on me this year. The first one I read from her was The Women. This one follows a nurse as she goes to the Vietnamese War and follows her as she's in the war, how she witnesses these like horrific things that happen there, but then also there's a lot of the story that follows her after the war and explores how she like adjusts back to real life, how the people back home accept her and see her after coming back from a war. And oh my gosh, this book also made me sob. It was so good. It is, I think it's still my favorite Kristin Hannah to this day, and it was the first one I read from her. But yeah, this is the first Kristin Hannah. The second is The Great Alone. This one is more of a slower burn story where we follow a family and our main characters through like a decade. In our family here, we have a father, the dad of the family, came back from a war. He's a veteran and he's really struggling with mental health and adjusting back to real life. He has all this PTSD and he really takes it out on his family. Like he's not adjusting very well. So he decides that to like fix himself, they have to move to Alaska and to get some fresh air and some peace and to get out of the city, and that's how he will heal and that's how he will do better for his family. We see them struggle through adjusting, like how they learn how to live off the land, how they deal with like the harsh winters and the nature of Alaska. But then we also see how these characters like emotionally and mentally develop through all of that. Some of them go further down, some of them start really healing and growing with it themselves. And this is, yeah, Kristin Hannah just makes me cry, so also made me cry. 2 out of 2. And then The Nightingale. I think this one is probably her most popular, like her most famous book. This one follows 2 sisters during World War II and how they both take like different parts in the war. They react differently to the war. One is definitely more of like a softer, motherly, caring character. And then the second sister is a bit more reckless. She starts trying to take more of like an active role in the war. And we see how, yeah, the 2 of them like grow farther apart and then maybe they come back together for a little bit and grow far apart again. It's a beautiful story, genuinely a beautiful story. 3 out of 3. We do have another historical fiction on the list. We're getting down to the last 2 in this pile. All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This one is also set in World War II, but we follow a daughter and her father who live in Paris. The little girl is blind and the father is, he works at like a stone museum. The Museum of Natural History, where he works as like, I think he makes like locks or he like maintains locks. But yeah, we follow them as like the war starts and like gradually starts getting worse and worse and worse. And we see them as they like try and like venture across France to try and find places that are safer. Oh, this one was so good. I read this one a long time ago, but like, you know, when you like look back on books, like think back on them after like months after reading them and you're like, oh yeah, that was really good. I feel like Anthony Doerr just wrote this as such a fast-paced story. I swear some of the chapters in this book were like a page or half a page long and you felt really into the moment. This book is multi-POV, so we're switching between different characters but also between different timelines. So we'll switch from like now to the past to even farther in the past back to now, and just the way the story was told was really well done. Like I feel like the crafting of the structure of it was really, really good. And the last book, the final book of this list, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I cannot believe a classic made it onto my top 24 of 2024. I did recently read this book and make a video. It's my Reading Like Rory Gilmore video. If you want to watch it, it's like the thumbnail is a picture of me beside Rory sitting on a bench reading together. So I'm not gonna like yap too much about this, but this is a classic I loved. I read The Great Gatsby and I read this, and I just feel like the level of writing and storytelling is so good. You truly see these characters as they go through ups and downs. Some of them have more of an upwards trajectory and some of them have more of a downwards trajectory, and you really like feel like you're in that period when you're reading this book. It's really immersive. Love the story. It's near and dear to my heart. I'm also so excited because I got tickets to watch the ballet Anna Karenina that's coming to Toronto next summer. So I'm really excited to see like how the story adapts to the stage, because I feel like a lot of this book is about the characters' inner thoughts. Like we just have rambling inner dialogues, inner monologues in this book. So I'm really curious to see how the story will be portrayed without being able to directly see into the characters' minds and like read or hear like the specific thoughts that they're thinking. I think it's gonna be really, really interesting experiencing this in like the ballet format. So that's Anna Karenina, and that concludes this video. Those are my top 24 books of 2024. This was a great year of reading. I read, I think, like over 150 books. Let's check what my Goodreads. So as of right now, I have read 153 books and it is December 14th. So I'll probably read like maybe 158 by the end of the year. We'll see. We'll see when we get there. Out of 153, those were my top 24. So I definitely like a lot of fantasy. That's what I'm seeing from this pile of books. And I love books that make me cry. I don't know if that says a lot about me, but that's just what I enjoyed this year. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment. If you don't know what to comment down below, just let me know, I don't know, some of your favorite reads of this year as well. You don't have to make a list of 24 if you don't want to, but anyone who makes a list of 24 books in the comments, I will love you forever, because I want to see your lists, like your top 24 lists as well. I think that would be a lot of fun actually to go through. So yeah, you know what? Leave me your 24 top reads of the year. Is that too much to ask in a comment? Maybe, but that's what I'm gonna ask. If you like me, subscribe, do that bell thing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!